Polybase. Polybase has been around since SQL Server 2016, and really what it is, it's a distributed compute engine. It's integrated right in with SQL Server and allows you to query all sorts of different data sources. So using ODBC, so I can query Excel, I can query NoSQL, like Azure Blob Storage or Cosmos DB or Microsoft SQL, relational databases, or even big data. And big data really was kind of the driving force behind Polybase to begin with, right? So when I was at Microsoft, one of the big things that they were pushing was, they did Hadoop, right? Which was, they had licensed Hortonworks and we're offering that as a service. But hey, I've got all this data distributed out there in different formats, but I don't want to have to pull it in and do something with it. So can I query it where it's at, right? And so we think about, one of the main goals of Polybase was really to reduce the need of ETL. So if we think about it, Polybase equals data virtualization equals the reduced need for ETL, right? One of the main tenets for Polybase is to provide distributed read scale performance, right? So if you think about big data, right, Hadoop it's a multi-node scenario where I'm distributing my workload across many nodes, right? Well, if I can take SQL Server and query that and push a query across, I want to query all this data and distribute that across all the Hadoop nodes, bring the results back, boom, right? Without doing all this ETL stuff. So it's really a distributed compute engine right into SQL Server, right? When you install SQL Server, one of the options is, hey, install Polybase. I mentioned this, the whole goal is to say, hey, I don't want to let's reduce ETL, query the data where it's at, whether it's in, Azure, whether it's in, like Excel or Hadoop or Oracle, whatever, query it where it's at. I want to execute a query, write a T-SQL statement, execute that statement, have it pushed down to where the data resides, and then bring the data back, right? So again, reduce the need for ETL. If I want to, if I'm doing a more, I'll call it complex scenario where, hey, it's a distributed environment, and we call it in there in the first bullet point, right? Distributed compute engine, right? So I can distribute my queries across multiple nodes if I need to, right? So even with SQL Server, I can distribute my workload across many nodes to improve the performance of my query. And that's awesome. Really love that. I can, it's a manual deploy, but I can also auto deploy that with big data clusters. This is what Polybase is all about, right? Can we eliminate the need for ETL, improve our query performance by distributing that across many nodes, and make it easy to query data where it's at? I mentioned this, it's all about data virtualization. So let's think about Polybase as a semantic layer, right? So what it does is, and we'll see this in the next slide and in the demo, right? What it does is it creates an external table that maps to your source data, whether it's a flat file, whether it's another SQL table or Hadoop or whatever, right? Create an external table that maps to that data. The great thing about this, it can obfuscate some of the data that we don't want to bring back, right? So if a table's got 10 columns, but we only want to see 5, we can exclude 5 of those columns and just create our external table on those 5 columns that we want to see, or just the data that we want to see, right? Where we really can't do that with linked servers. So there's great security around just, to be able to obfuscate some of that data, right? We'll talk about joins and data source access here in a little bit, but another great thing about Polybase is, and I've got a quick demo about this, is we can actually use views, SQL Server views, to abstract some of that data as well on some of the data sources. And then we have, since it's SQL Server, you can use joins and unions to collect and gather that data and query all sorts of data, right? So if I want to union and join data from different data sources, I can do that right through Polybase because it uses the T-SQL language. So it's phenomenal. It doesn't matter where my data sits. I can do that. I can query different data sources and union and join those together right through T-SQL.